Howdy gamers, let's talk about the runes for Orianna mid lane. She does have a few keystone variations and they change how she can play things out or the benefits that she gets through winning lane or scaling into the late game. So starting off with Summon Airy. Summon Airy offers you more poke in lane and then through that creating better lane states and also letting you beat weaker opponents or just weaker champions in the mid lane. The other keystone is Phase Rush. Phase Rush gives you a bit of utility against melee champions in the mid lane, especially melee champions that make things really volatile, levels like 1 to 7 ish. So think about champions like Pantheon, Renekton, etc., where they're usually trying to set up their jungler as well. Phase Rush helps you just escape like 2-man, 3-man ganks every single time. That's a huge utility in it. The offensive utility of Phase Rush is kind of lackluster compared to something like Unsealed Spellbook. With Unsealed Spellbook, you get access to extra summoner spells, and then with that, you gain a lot more functionality come mid to late game, as the extra summoner spells in a team fight mean a lot more than the keystones like can. So there's a ton of utility in that. So starting off with Summon Airy. Summon Airy, again, giving you more poke in lane. Your attacks and abilities send Airy to a target, damaging enemy champions, or shielding allies. So it also has the dual purpose, which Orianna can use because of her shield, to gain a bigger shield, but with Summon Airy, it's mostly just for the extra damage in lane because Airy effectively doesn't have a cooldown. The cooldown of Summon Airy is based on how long it takes Airy to come back to you, and since Orianna's Q is basically never on a cooldown, and since your auto attacks are meaningful as well, it's a really deadly combination to just being able to take like really good trades against the enemy. And even if they retaliate, then you still have Orianna's E to shield yourself. So really strong rune that's going to add to your poke in lane. And then through adding to the poke, you just create a better lane state for yourself, be it a safer one or a winning one based off the damage that you deal. For the secondary runes, you have good options in Monoflow Band or Nimbus Cloak. I think Nimbus Cloak is kind of underrated. Even if you're not running Unsealed Spellbook, you still have usually a defensive summoner spell with Orianna, even in winning lanes. So summoner spells like Barrier, Heal, Cleanse. Nimbus Cloak gives them extra functionality, as with Nimbus Cloak, after you cast a summoner spell, you gain a movement speed increase that lasts for 2.5 seconds and allows you to pass through units. Basically achieving what Phase Rush wants to do, but like on the cast of your summoner spell versus on the instances of your damage against the enemy. If Phase Rush is on cooldown too, it gives the enemy opportunities to exploit Orianna at those stages too. So I really don't value Phase Rush that much, but with Nimbus Cloak, you increase the movement speed increase is based off the cooldown of the summoner spell. So if you flash, you're going to go faster, and then if you're casting a lower cooldown like Barrier, it doesn't give you as much movement speed, but the movement speed gained is going to be sufficient enough regardless. So it's a really brutal summoner spell for the enemy to have to deal with, as if it's a melee champion, when they finally get on top of you and you use Barrier, not only are you blocking damage from them, but you're also getting movement speed away from them. If they still continue to stay on you, you still have your E and your W to continue to get away. So it's really strong in that aspect. And then if you're winning lane, the extra movement speed from Nimbus Cloak is going to let you run down the enemy and actually finish them off in certain cases. If you get ganked, you can just use the summoner spell and then run in the opposite direction of that gank and then probably get away, because with that much movement speed in combination with the W, it gives you a lot of variance. Maybe that's not the right word. A lot of distance away from the enemy, in which them chasing you is just way less likely. The other option would be Monoflow Ban. With Monoflow Ban, hitting an enemy champion with an ability permanently increases your maximum mana by 25 up to 250. And then once you reach that 250, then you also restore 1% of your missing mana every 5 seconds. I don't think Orianna needs Monoflow Ban, because you're already building a mana item first in either Lost Chapter item, Ludens or GLP. And Monoflow Ban really comes into effect on your second or third recall. And on those recalls, Orianna's already going to be at a fine point. So I think giving up Monoflow Ban for Nimbus Cloak in most situations is going to be worth it. But Monoflow Band is easier to use, and then I suppose more basic. So I wouldn't recommend it as a default, but if you're looking for an easier option, I think Monoflow Band is completely fine. For the third rune, I think your best option is Transcendence. Transcendence giving you 10% cooldown reduction whenever you reach level 10. The only other option would be Absolute Focus. You gain ability power while you're above 70% HP, and then this ability power is based on level. The 10% cooldown reduction is going to go a lot further, as if you get one more rotation of your abilities off, then it's going to be more impactful than having a little bit of extra AP, as another cast of the ability is always going to be outweighing the damage that would have been dealt by having the extra ability power. Transcendence also works really well with Orianna's build, as your first item's always going to be giving you 20% cooldown reduction, and then you can get 10% from runes, and then you can have 10% from blue buff, putting you at 40% at most stages of the game, making her even more brutal of a champion. For the fourth rune, it's going to be Scorch. If you're running Airy, then running Gathering Storm seems pretty misguided in my opinion. Even if you're trying to scale on Orianna, you're better off doing so with your itemization versus with the runes. Unless Scorch just gives you zero value, depending on your lane matchup, I think you should always look to run Scorch. In combination with Summon Airy, you're just compounding way more damage in the laning phase than you otherwise would be able to. With Scorch, your next damaging ability that hits an enemy deals bonus magic damage based on your level, and it's only on a 10-second cooldown. So almost every single time you could be casting your Q, you'll be proccing Scorch and Airy, and again, both together. Make it very lame for the enemy to just combat. For the secondary runes, if you're playing into a ranged matchup, I think Domination's your best bet with Taste of Blood and Ravenous Hunter. Taste of Blood also acting as a laning tool. When you heal whenever you damage an enemy champion, and then this is on a 20-second cooldown. The heal is based off a flat amount, but that's kind of whatever. And then with Ravenous Hunter, you heal for a percentage of damage dealt by your abilities, and then this stacks up with Ravenous Hunter. It's based off Bounty Hunter stacks. The Bounty Hunter stacks are based off each unique takedown. So killing the mid laner's one, getting a killer assist on the jungler's one, getting a killer assist on the mid lane, AD, support, etc. Since Orianna also has a somewhat supportive kit, it's pretty likely that you're going to get a lot of assists at the very least. So it's easy to build up the Bounty Hunter stacks regardless of the game state. And then therefore you'll have the percentage healing be more impactful in come mid to late game. Orianna also makes pretty good use out of the percentage healing, as most of her, all of her abilities outside of her passive is AoE. And if you're damaging more targets, then you're getting more percentage damage dealt, and then therefore more healing with your kit. Since Orianna is kind of short range, the healing also comes into play, where you can be spending your HP more offensively if you know that you're going to be healing it up. Like, you cast one rotation of your QW, and then you can use a QW ult, and then be at a significant amount of HP. So you can create situations in which you just have more effective HP to play with, and that's way stronger in the mid game. If you're laning against a melee champions like Pantheon, Irelia, you're probably going to be getting more value out of Inspiration with Biscuit Delivery and Time Warp Tonic. Achieving about the same thing that Domination Tree does, giving you extra healing, but in a different way that is more suited for those matchups. With Biscuit Delivery, the biscuits restore 10% of your missing health and mana. Consuming a biscuit permanently increases your mana by 50. And then with Time Warp Tonic, consuming a potion or biscuit grants you 50% of the HP and mana regeneration immediately. So with this, it helps you be at higher amounts of HP immediately, and that's really important in these melee matchups where they're just looking to burst you almost immediately. So Time Warp Tonic in combination with biscuits and Corrupting Potion, again, just makes it so that whenever these champions dive onto you, you can go from 60% HP to like 80 instantly by using both, or you could go from 30% of HP to 50, and that's going to go a long way. Time Warp Tonic's also going to be giving you 5% movement speed, so in combination with Nimbus Cloak and your W, it will help you get away from melee champions that actually have lethal on you. For the adaptive runes, I think you should go with ability power, and then depending on your matchup, I think that you should look to switch the armor and magic resist. So if you're playing into an AD matchup, obviously you want the +6 armor, and then if you're playing into a magic damage matchup, champions like Syndra, Orianna, or Syndra, Kassadin, etc., you want the magic resist. And I think that's really the only meaningful variations in the secondary runes for Orianna. She doesn't need something like Dematerializer because her full combo is already clearing the wave. Something like Perfect Timing and Cosmic Insight is like a greedier option, and then the scaling with it is really goes to waste compared to something like Taste of Blood and Ravenous Hunter. And then you don't need the extra damage from Coup de Grace, Cut Down, or Last Stand for Orianna. But if you were looking for a greedier option, I suppose that Presence of Mind and Cut Down would probably be it, as Orianna doesn't build health items, and then most champions that she's going to be hitting will have more health than her, and you can get the mana regeneration from Presence of Mind. But Orianna also isn't a champion that really runs out of mana in a fight, so yeah, that's that. For the other runes, starting off with Phase Rush, all that would really change with Phase Rush would be the keystone from Aerie to Phase Rush, and then again, the utility of Phase Rush is being able to run someone down or run away from them, and it's only on a 15-second cooldown. But with that 15-second cooldown, I think that it still leaves room for you to be exploited in the purpose that it's trying to serve. And the purpose that it's trying to serve is like, in most cases, I think would just be to cover up your mistakes versus like amplifying what Orianna does well. Because if you're going to avoid a gank, you're going to do it through being in the right position in a lane and then being like playing around your jungler correctly as well. Phase Rush kind of lets you just play the game in a solo, like a single player way, and then avoid ganks regardless of your team's impact or like your own play around them. So I really don't value Phase Rush that highly. As a scaling option too, it lets you side lane a bit easier, that's for sure. But Nimbus Cloak would also do about the same thing in combination with Unsealed Spellbook. So I think it's a great option in solo queue because you're not going to be able to rely on your teammates as much, but at the same time, I don't like it compared to just winning lane harder with Aerie or looking to scale with Summoner Spellbook. So, and then the secondary runes for this page would work the same way they would with Summon Aerie, depending on the matchups. With Unsealed Spellbook, it's going to put you in the Inspiration tree, and then you have your best options are going to be Magical Footwear, Biscuit Delivery. You can also go Futures Market. With Futures Market, the benefit of it is that you can get Lost Chapter before your lane opponent, as you can borrow gold, and then with that, you can come back to lane at a timing in which you can have Lost Chapter and the enemy laner can't, and then with that, you can lock them into lane because you can always push out the wave and then never run out of mana. And then when you do that, you can start farming your own team's Raptors or the enemy's Raptors, depending on the lane state, and then you really start snowballing ahead of them. So that's a really, really strong option. With Biscuit Delivery, it has the same functionality as it did prior with Time Warp Tonic, negating all ends and then still giving you some utility there. For the secondary runes, going Domination second is a bit more expensive if you're running Unsealed Spellbook, as you're missing out on pretty important things from the sorcery tree, mostly being Monoflow Band, Scorch, or Transcendence, or Nimbus Cloak. So I think your better scaling options is Nimbus Cloak and Transcendence, as you gain the extra movement speed from the summoner spells, which is just wildly useful, and then you still gain the extra cooldown reduction from Transcendence. If you were to run something like Monoflow and Scorch, it would say like you're trying to play for lane. And if you're running Unsealed Spellbook, I don't think that you really need that for the lane. These runes are their most impactful around levels like 1 to 8, and Unsealed Spellbook is most impactful like levels 9 to about 18. So I think you should be looking for more scaling options, and with that, just be more useful at the like coming into mid game versus early game. I think you would look to run this into matchups in which the enemy has definite scaling. So against champions like Kassadin or Azir, maybe the champions that outrange you, where the mid lane becomes a wave clear game anyways, versus when you can use Summon Aerie to actually beat down the enemy champions if they're weaker early. Unsealed Spellbook gives you the scaling option that helps you circumvent the lane matchup, even if it's a wave clear one, and then still have utility come mid to late game. So that's the utility of it, and I think that's how you should be looking to use it. And with the runes, I think if you're going this, then you should be looking to get as much scaling as you can from the secondary runes, and Nimbus Cloak and Transcendence are going to be giving you that versus the other runes that are available. So that's my thoughts on Orianna runes. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments. I answer literally all of them. If this video helped you, leaving a like on the video helps me. And Yeah. Oh yeah, check out my Twitch. It's twitch.tv/SawyerNelson. I don't play Orianna, but shit, already great promo. I don't play Orianna, but I don't know. Check it out. Shit. Nice. Check it out. I'll play Orianna. I promise, man.